biological weapons are either microorganisms or biological toxins which are used and modified versions of viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoans and toxic substances which are used for widespread destruction of humankind, plants and animals. As the name suggests, we can say that biological weapons are manufactured synthetically in laboratories. Types of biological weapons. Firstly, bacterial weapons like anthrax and plague, virus weapons which cause smallpox, rickettsia like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and epidemic typhus. Toxins, fungal weapons in entomology. Toxins, for example, tetrodotoxins and mycotoxins. Fungal weapons like candidiasis and cryptococcus. Entomology like locust attack, plague infected by rats. Next slide. History of biological weapons. To know anything about this topic, we must begin in the history. First, let's talk about the old texts or ancient scriptures we have about this from the antiquity stage and the Middle Ages. Since the Middle Age or the Medieval Age, biological weapons have been a part of warfare between many countries and many civilizations. According to the ancient texts first ever recorded, which was around 1500 to 120 BCE, in which victims were infected with tularemia or also commonly known as rabbit fever. These infected people were sent into enemy lands and caused pandemics. Secondly, in other places, poisons were used. For example, mixing fungi of ergot into wells from which they consume water and infecting them with fungal diseases, therefore eventually causing widespread destructions. Next, they dipped their weapons in excrements and fought to infect their enemies with tetanus, which caused severe skin diseases and health issues. To note, antiquity also means Middle Age or a time previous to Middle Age. Now let's speak about the 18th to 19th century. This happens during this 18th to 19th century is a timeline where the French and the Indian War, a 7-year-long war that pit the British colonies against the French. In June 1763, the Native Americans laid a blockade also known as a siege at Fort Pitt, which is a British colony. The commander declared his troop to infect the towels or blankets with smallpox disease and spread all over the camp where the siege or the blockade was situated, and when or in whichever circumstance the people at the blockade or the victims who were tired would use these blankets were severely diseased or infected by this smallpox virus, and therefore they would be ineligible to continue the siege or a blockade. And next, very famous biological weapons and strategies were used in the American wars. For example, the American Revolutionary War and the Continental Wars. Now let's talk about the World War I. The World War I, the time period between the 90s to 1920s, this happens by the germ theory advances, bacteriology modifies due to technology, and many different types of biological weapons have started to enter the field. For example, new types of biological warfare techniques were eminent. Biological sabotage was undertaken by the Germans. If they sabotaged the whole nation or the whole area with a particular disease, they were not allowed, they wouldn't be able to go away from that location, as it would affect even surrounding colonies, which would be a downfall for them. Therefore, they sabotaged the particular people or the nation or the city in one particular place, isolating them from the outside world. And the Geneva Protocol, which was implemented in 1925, restricts the usage of biological weapons in warfare systems, but allows the possession and modification of these weapons for personal uses. World War II, a vast topic where these particular biological weapons have been used intensively. The onset of the World War II was destruction. The Ministry of Supply in UK has started modifying and possessing these biological weapons. At Porton Down, the famous microbiologist behind this is Paul Phillips. The research championed and soon diseases like tularemia, anthrax, and brucellosis were in picture. Grenada Island of Scotland was heavily toxified by a disease called anthrax during a series of tests. These tests were conducted by the United Kingdoms, who wanted to test how strong their biological weapons was, and this was happened in the 1940s, but till 56 years there was no habitable zone in that particular island. Till 1996 to 2000s, nothing was inhabitable and nothing was biologically safe for that particular island. So it was mass destruction played by the UKs. Soon the United States joined the frame and it got interested in these biological weapons. They started their own research regarding this field. At Fort Detrick, Maryland, the study and research was conducted, and there were tests at Dugweb Proving Grounds at Utah. These tests helped the United States to know more about what these biological weapons are, how to use them in biological warfare, and what precautions they might take and they need to take for the safety of the people who are researching regarding this topic. And then the Imperial Japanese army was having a more brutal way of knowing about these weapons, and this was happening in secret. They used to research about them and conduct secret tests on their own citizens, like test rats or guinea pigs. The base at Pingfang, Manchuria, Lieutenant General Sin Shiro and Ishii commanded it. They conducted human tests on prisoners and outlaws. This is how they got to know more about how effective, how dangerous these biological weapons are, and how well they can be used in biological warfare. And then, even though they lacked in technological advancements and many more funds, they were very deadly in this particular field. Now let's know few more terms about biological warfare or biological weapons. Bioterrorism. Bioterrorism is a situation in which terrorists use biological weapons and use biological warfare for attack for their own beliefs. It is said that biological weapons are very undetectable and the cost of bearing them is 0.05% when compared to regular conventional weapons like guns, bombs, etc. And these weapons are even more useful when it comes to widespread destruction, as they are undetectable and they are viruses, bacteria, etc. which flow on their own. They have their own means of spreading. Therefore, they are very undetectable and cause a very widespread damage. And each type of biological weapon consists of a different type of pathogen which has its own time for activation. This activation period makes it even more difficult for the people to know when it infected them. And secondly, as mentioned earlier, the Geneva Protocol prohibits the usage of these biological weapons in warfare, but does not prohibit the possession and production of these weapons. Moreover, the production of these weapons are easy and do not use high-level technology, as they are just modification and combination of different pathogens and their DNAs. They can be easily mixed with sprays, foods, vaccines, and day-to-day items like towels, water, etc., which makes it even more difficult for the detection and precaution. Those pathogens, as said, they don't show immediate symptoms. They infect the particular body, and then after a bit of time, incubation time like 5 to 7 days or 4 to 3 days, they start showing their symptoms. Second important term, entomology. As mentioned, biological warfare use insects as one of their types for biological warfare. Entomology, this concept has existed since many past centuries and existed till our modern research. This type of warfare might use insects as direct, indirect or vector systems, where in first case, when they use it as a direct system, they use these weapons as directly attacking the enemies. Secondly, they use these insects as vectors to infect them, or they thirdly affect agriculture, for example locust attacks, rats, etc. Genetics. This is a theoretical circumstance and where they modify the genetics of pathogens and this has not been implemented, but in near future, like the 10 years, 20 years, this might be a present. This would have vaccine ineffectivity, would grant resistance against antibiotics, would increase the transmissibility of the pathogens, would grant the evasion of detectability by scientific tools, would enable the weaponization of these particular biological weapons. They mainly focus on DNA manipulation. Rupal. I would like to conclude the pictorial representation here shows the history and here shows the present. At this point of time, Russia and the US were deeply into these researches, while the rest of the countries were not that into these researches. And here, currently, except the United States and the Russia and Iran, none of the countries are into these biological warfares. I would like to conclude my topic by saying that we must always use science for the betterment of our environment, but not to destroy the environment. And I would like to say that use your knowledge, education for helping on the future generations. And as we are all part of the environment, I would like to request each and every one of you to plant at least one plant for every 6 months for the betterment of our global situation. Thank you.
So, are there any countries that are using like bio weapons still now?
Currently, none of the countries are supposed to be using these biological weapons in bio warfare because it's prohibited and it's inhuman. One very popular example is Hitler. He used this biological warfare against the Jews in his own country. For example, he sent them into gas chambers. He inhumanly tortured them and killed them with infecting them with gases, poisons and toxins. They were becoming very paralyzed, they were unable to breathe and soon they died due to lack of immunity. This is why biological warfare has been prohibited and only to be used as a last resort.
Okay. So, is there any evidence that they use this in Ukraine war between Ukraine and Russia? Do you have any?
There is no evidence regarding the
Okay.
concrete use of these weapons.
Okay, so you mentioned about Geneva Treaty, right?
Yes.
Geneva, other than that, are there any other convention or treaty which prohibits accumulation or?
There mostly may not be, but the only Geneva Protocol has everything that needs to be prohibited. Therefore, there's no need of any other extra treaties or protocols which need to be signed.
Recently, US was in news related to bioweapons. Do you have any update on that? Okay, just check that. You mentioned about vector, right?
Yes.
Vector based. So can you explain vector based? Why? Because even I'm not exactly sure of the term. Even COVID vaccines also based on there are different variants, right? Like one is vector based, some vaccination, right? So what do you mean by vector?
So what I mean by vector in entomology is the insects, for example mosquitoes, locusts and etc. are infected with particular bacteria or viruses like anthrax or tularemia and sent into the enemy fields. They slowly infect the animals, humans or plants and tend to succumb them to diseases which fatally puts down the country's economy, culture and politics.
And nice conclusion.
Content was little big and you try to manage the time and don't make one concept in whole of the slide. Okay, make it 2 in a page so that you can run quickly.
And content is actually huge. I needed to.
I've tried to reduce because the time sir have given you is maximum is 7.7 minutes and 30 seconds, right? So you need to. And did you do the dry run at home? Like after preparing the slide, did you practice it?
Not much. I just practiced on my own.
And moreover, sit with someone and have a note of your time. Okay, at the time of explaining, this will help you to come to one point. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's good.
Thank you, sir.
One question.
Yes, sir.
It's not exactly the uses of bioweapon or bioweapon, sorry. There are many, I think, if I believe in the data, some facts are there also. that there are certain medicines which have been launched in the market just after the onset of certain infection. Okay, so basically what I want to say here is a particular type of pathogen was introduced in the market or in the India or any other country, and immediately the manufacturers have used that to generate a vaccine or to just to manufacture a particular medicine. So how exactly you are going to put that? There, suppose if I'm spreading a particular disease in my own country for my benefit, don't you think that also could be considered as a bioweapon for my benefit?
It is actually considered as a bioweapon. You can conduct tests on, like we call them lab rats, so-called lab rats. They use particular people, like prisoners, outlaws, who have done inhuman practices in their past. Usually, the government especially doesn't use civilians for these tests. They mostly use those lab rats for those tests because there's no use of them being in our society. They only cause harm.
My question is something different. Let's say, for example, there's a drug called X. Okay, and there's a disease called Y. So, onset of disease had happened only 1 month before, and X is now available in the market. How did this happen? Because just for normal drug discovery, it takes minimum, of 6 to 7 months. Because recently, COVID vaccine has come very, fast. Okay, though it was originated from, China, Wuhan, right? So, don't you think that this also could be a threat? Means I am a manufacturer. I own a pharma industry. I am, releasing a particular pathogen for my interest, so that I can create money out of it. I am killing my own people, right? So how exactly you think about it? Though it is not means it is not used as a bioweapon, but it has certain, benefit for me. So how do you think that?
But if you overlook it, we are overlooking it as a benefit. Because if we use these pathogens against our own civilians, it will decrease the human resources in our country. Human resources are used to increase the economy, culture and politics in the nation, which helps in the upliftment of the nation. If we are using these weapons or these biological components on our own civilians, it will drop the human resources and bring a certain type of fear in people. Like they won't socially interact because they might not know which component has been used at which particular place.
A little out of track, but okay, fine. Thank you.